Asylum's world, party time, excellent. Cue the music.
That why don't we have that as a jingle like from now on? You know, like screw the like glitchy stuff. But anyway.
You know, I was just thinking that was a proper like culture. We just showed our age off right there with that reference to Wayne's World.
Yeah, why wasn't Wayne's World on our recommended list? I actually don't know. That's ridiculous.
Yeah, we should probably do a part 2, recommended movies.
Because literally, I just thought of Biodome.
Oh, dude, Biodome. That was epic. Pauly Shaw in his heyday.
Okay, this is not what the video is about, if anyone cares. But
Yeah.
as you guys,
We wanted to use this to also talk about some of our other interests, hey? Yeah.
yeah, I said I wanted to, like, if anyone's watched our first video too, Warren goes quite into depth about he's a huge fan of action figures, so we thought we would maybe do that. I'm going to wing it during this video, but I'm hoping Warren just takes up most of the time and educates us, because I had toys and figures as a kid, but I didn't take it as seriously as you've taken it now. So Yardi, I don't know if you want to take it away and take us through.
Yeah, I am more than happy to. So, yeah, again, I referenced it in our first video, what it was for me and what it meant to me. And I would definitely recommend some folks go and check out some of our earlier videos when we were in studio before lockdown. But action figures for me was definitely a form of escapism. Growing up as a kid, we weren't well off, we weren't wealthy, but we certainly weren't struggling either. So I was a bit fortunate that my parents could give me that mechanism, and I had like the Thundercats, I had the He-Man action figures, and as things went on, I had G.I. Joe action figures, not the tall, big 12-inch one. Maybe I should backpedal for some folks. So in the action figure world, you get an assortment of different sizes and ranges, and the old days, there was this G.I. Joe action figure, relatively anatomically correct. He was about 12 inches in height. So for those folks that are using the metric system here, roughly 12 inches equates to about 30 centimeters. That's how tall he was. And he had, like, similar to the Barbie dolls of the era, the Kens and Barbie dolls, he had clothes that he'd put on, like army gear, guns, helmets, etc. Then the action figure market evolved when the Star Wars movie came out, and there was a company called Kenner who got the license to make Star Wars figures, and they were a new company. They were small in comparison to like the likes of Mattel doing those Barbies and things. And when asked, how should we do this? What's the most cost-effective way to make an action figure? A famous story goes that the main decision maker put up his fingers and said, make them that big. And the guy said, don't move. And they took a rule and they measured, and that ended up being 3 3/4 inches, just short of 4 inches tall. And they believed they could make figures like that. And one step further, make vehicles for those figures to actually sit in and interact in. And that original Star Wars line had like the Millennium Falcon, had TIE fighters and X-Wings and stuff that they could actually take your Lukes and your Vaders and put them inside these things and play around with those vehicles. And for me, the G.I. Joe range was modeled on that same thing. So yeah, there was an assortment of vehicles and that, and I'll get onto the G.I. Joes a bit more in depth because I've got some here that I'd like to show off. But I had all these toys. I had a great childhood, and at one point my parents convinced me, probably for the better, to donate all of my action figures to the kids less fortunate. And at the time, I loved that idea. I was like, I would love to be able to give at least one child that kind of escapism, that kind of imagination. Let them, if they're not as fortunate as I am, at least they could have these action figures that make them smile, bring them joy, something along those lines. Yeah. Soon after that, somewhere in my teens, I think I had a bit of remorse, some kind of setback. I missed that part of my childhood, my being, whatever it was. It was around about the same time that Fox was doing the X-Men cartoon, and we referenced that in one of our earlier videos too. The classic theme song. And around about that time, I remember it vividly. I was walking through a mall with my cousin Alon, who's actually in America right now. And we went to the mall, we walked past this toy store, and in the window, there they had this guy over here from Toy Biz. It is the Wolverine action figure. He can be moved, posed. He's even got a little thing on his back so you can actually swip him from side to side so you can slash at people with his little claws here. And they're spring-loaded claws that can go in and out. So you could literally hack, slash, and stab guys. And just, this is my Wolverine. This costume, this color scheme, this everything. He's amazing. I love him. He comes with a little like machine / laser gun. I don't know why, because he's Wolverine. He doesn't use guns.
Yeah.
But so I saw that in the window, and I was like, I need to have this. I had pocket money, and I thought, you know what, bugger this. I think we were going to go see movies, and my cousin Alon had to end up sponsoring my movie ticket and popcorn because I was like, damn this, I need this in my life again.
Nice.
And that's what sparked off, I suppose you could say, Toy Collection 2.0. And I haven't looked back since. And I've kind of had a weird, I think everyone collects for their own reasons, nostalgia, love, value. Sometimes it's just the hunt and the joy of the collection. There's a lot of that for me in the various collections that I have. Toys, comics, graphic novels. I think in time we'll talk about signed comic books that we've got as well, which is kind of a variation just on comic collecting. But part of that is the hunt. It's trying to track the thing down, find it, and then that feeling of actually getting it into your collection, into your realm. It's quite special. And that's what I did with my action figures. I went on a thing to look for more action figures. It started out in the superhero veins. I was a Marvel fan back then, so I was getting some Wolverines, getting some X-Men, getting Hulks and Caps and Iron Men and all of those figures. I evolved into liking DC as well, so then I had to have some Superman, Batman, all the classic characters that I gravitated to, and that's generally my rule with collecting. If I'm going to get a first appearance, rare comic of a character, it's because something about that character speaks to me. It's the same thing with signed comics. If I like the artist or I like the writer, I want to get something of theirs that they've done, a comic they've written or drawn, signed by the artist or writer. And with action figures, it's I want some form, physical embodiment of that character on display to make me smile. In some cases, I have multiple iterations, so multiple Wolverines in different costumes and different sizes. I don't generally get the 12 inches, the 30 centimeter guys. I stick to the 3 3/4 range or the 6-inch range, which is actually quite popular right now in the industry. And in that range, if I show you the 3 3/4, there was G.I. Joe over here. This is one of my all-time favorite G.I. Joes, character called Sci-Fi.
Cool.
And this is like character all the way from the 80s. And I like them because they were very articulated. You could do things with their arms, open them up, you could swivel and turn, you could bend the knees and their bodies and stuff and heads. You could, a lot of different ways of moving them in ranges of motion.
And they got those elastic sort of inside torsos. Or am I wrong?
They've got that?
So those inside the torsos, there's that like the elastic band that pulls the legs together on those two little. Yeah, so
100%. We call it the O-ring, and I even had to find a whole pack of O-rings. I've got hundreds of O-rings just sitting in reserve for that elastic can wear away and snap. So every now and again I have to perform surgery. I have to take everything off, take a little screwdriver, open the guy up, replace the O-ring, and try to get all the parts back in, and then close him up so nothing snaps out of place or whatever. So
it's so funny, dude. They would have solved a bunch of my childhood issues because, like, I used to take them if one was missing a leg or I couldn't. He'd be like a dude that's like fallen in battlefield, and I'd try and wing it as a kid when I would play with them.
Man. And with G.I. Joe, they've recently re-released, so they're doing a whole bunch of remakes or updates. So here's like original 80s sci-fi, and then they've done a remake of him, slightly different color scheme, more modernized update on the weapons. This one you can actually take his helmet off, so you can see him without the helmet, or you can put the helmet on. I like this guy because he reminded me of RoboCop. And back as a kid, I was very much into RoboCop. There weren't any RoboCop action figures, and he, with his body armor, his helmet and everything, he reminded me of RoboCop. So whenever I would play with the toys, he wasn't sci-fi, he was RoboCop.
Nice.
Then there's the all-time favorite that everyone loves, the all-black ninja character in Snake Eyes. Comes with a little base or stand that you can put him on, and also very posable. His little ninja sword that slips in the back here, you can take the sword in or out. Very, very cool. Like I say, these were my guys. You know, the multiple weapons, things, pose them, different action sequences. There are a lot of guys. They just collect these things so they can make a whole series of sort of like setups where they're recreating battle scenes. They've got guys crouching behind rocks or coming out of little ponds of water, and they photograph those and they put them on their Instagrams. And I mean, that's a whole other level of collecting and putting these things to use. So if that's what you're into, then go for it. I'm all for it. Someone mentioned to me that in some cases, you know, sometimes we come across a bit not ultra puristic or set in our ways on certain things, and yeah, definitely I think everyone has likes or preferences, things that they gravitate to, but I don't think either of us would frown upon a person's means of collecting something, what that particular thing means to that person, why they do it, and if you want to collect the things to keep them mint on card, like this thing over here, still in box, never been opened.
Hulk 91.
Yeah, it's a Hulk and Wolverine 2-pack, man. And the only reason I have the Hulk and Wolverine 2-pack and it's never been opened is because I have both figures that I found singularly, and I have them open on my shelf. And I thought, may as well just keep this one in its box.
Man. I really like that.
And what I loved about this particular thing that Marvel did was it's the same size as the G.I. Joes, 3 3/4 figures. And traditionally, Marvel would always do all the popular guys, Hulks, Wolverines, etc. And in this particular line, they did a whole assortment of characters that they'd never actually done before. And I loved that. There were so many characters that I loved and could never, find in action figure format. And in that 3 3/4 line, the Marvel Universe line, they definitely fulfilled that. And then now, as I was saying, the latest evolution that everyone is sort of going for is the 6-inch line. I've still got this guy in box. I don't really need to have him in box because he's going to come out at some point when I actually have a place to put him on the stand. But I mean, for a comparison, there's the 3 3/4 guy. And you can see he's much bigger, much larger, full 6-inch figure over here. And the G.I. Joes were made by Hasbro. These new 6-inch ones are made by Hasbro, and I'll be honest, they own the market right now. They make the best stuff. Their articulation points that they've figured out, their flexibility in the torsos to bend them over and swivel them. They've got ankle movement, wrist movement. This guy's got interchangeable hands, so you can have him with claws out or claws in. Marvel Legends, this line is my new all-time favorite. They are doing characters in this line that I never thought would ever come to light.
That's cool.
And what they do now, this new model that they've got is it's kind of what they call build-a-figure. So there'll be about 6 figures in a line, And normally each figure comes with a body part, a torso, a leg, an arm. And if you collect the entire series, you can then build a bigger, larger figure that would normally be quite large in the comics. So like an Apocalypse or a Sentinel, Fin Fang Foom, Sauron, big, larger characters, and you can build them together. And the reason they do that is so they can do some of the lesser known B grade, C grade characters, even get them in an action figure for the folks that want them, but also make them collectible because people are trying to get that builder figure and make the larger.
Yeah, and I suppose it's a clever model because it kind of forces you to buy characters you don't even want to buy because you want to complete the build.
100%, man,
it's good marketing.
And that's partly what irks me is I don't want to commit to all those characters sometimes. Yeah. I really couldn't care about some of the characters. So I'm picky, I'm choosy, I get the guys I want. And there's somewhere in the back of my mind a little bit of remorse because I see how good an Apocalypse looks, or I see how good like a Juggernaut looks, and I go, I really want that. And the guys that do assemble them, that do sell them, those are pretty expensive figures to get because they kind of take this approach of, well, it cost me $60 or $70 to assemble the whole set of figures, and therefore the larger one, so I'm going to retail that or sell that on eBay at that kind of price range, and that gets a bit steep and a bit heavy for me. So there's a lot that I want to get, but just can't seem to find them in those price bands, and it kills, it hurts, man.
Yeah, especially here in sunny South Africa, man. That's
Yeah, totally. So I'm not really a keep them in their box kind of guy. As I get them, I like to rip it open. I like to make contact with it. I like to see how the joints move. I like to see how I could pose him. And when they eventually make their way onto a shelf, I like to pose them in certain instances. Sometimes I like the stoic poses, the here I am on a base looking, like a Superman should. I'm a beacon. I'm something that you can look up to or aspire to. And then other characters I like to have like a Wolverine, crouching, claws out, looking mean, looking vicious. I really dig that. And the only reason, like I said, some of those aren't out of the box is I'm out of shelf space. And even the shelf space that I have currently, I definitely want to go on a relook and put some dust-resistant cabinet doors in on some of those shelves because right now they're open. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this as a moment to say anybody who's watching our podcast here locally, if you make shelves or you can make shelves or doors and everything, drop me a comment with your details. Let me get in touch with you and maybe you can help revamp my current shelving infrastructure and potentially get me some more shelves for these other guys because before we went into lockdown, I think I've got upstairs around easily 10 to 12 quite large Amazon boxes that I went a bit crazy on Amazon with when there was still a favorable exchange rate and the shipping wasn't too bad. And I brought in a lot of stuff that I A, didn't know was out there, or B, always wanted and managed to find it through various people's little Amazon stores that they've got. So again, any means to support guys' initiatives, what they've got. Often it's action figure collecting, comic book collecting, all of it is definitely a case of one man's junk is another man's treasure.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
I have a random question for you that just came to mind. I'm keen to know, do you have that problem? I haven't had it that much. I'm lucky, but where maybe family comes over or friend and they've got a kid and this kid just sees your stuff on an open shelf and it's toys, and they just don't get it. And you've got to like negotiate that like without being a dick, but be like, no, you actually can't touch that. Stay away.
Yes. And a while back I was dating a girl. She had a little one and he was around I started dating her, he was probably about 5 or 6. And we were together for about 2.5 years. And yeah, I definitely remember that first time they came over for the weekend to my place. Normally it had been a case of they on certain weekends he was with his dad, and then when that happened she would come to me and it would just be the two of us. And we eventually went to that point where, okay, bring him over and let's go. And it was difficult, I won't lie, but it was definitely, I needed that. I needed to have this thing of I needed to get to a level where I could lose the things. You know what I mean? I can have this kid pick it up, touch it, potentially break it. I needed to get to terms with losing this particular thing and not coveting it so much, so that
your life depends on it, kind of.
it was a level of acceptance, I suppose you could say. So it was good for me. I needed that, but at the same token, I was very empathetic. Exactly what you're saying. This kid walked into that room and it was like, oh my God, this is my Graceland, or this is my whatever you want to call it. And I totally got that. I could see it on his face, that urge to go, wow, I want to touch, I want to play with all of these things. So what I actually ended up doing was I went on a hunting spree with him, and we went and I bought him his own little box of dedicated action figures. So he loved the Ninja Turtles. He saw my Ninja Turtles, and I went, great, I'm going to go out and buy you a set of Ninja Turtles so that you can play with your Ninja Turtles and you wouldn't have to play with mine. And then eventually, his own Superman, his own this, his own that. And it was a case of every now and again he'd be playing with his Ninja Turtles, come to me and go, Warren, are you okay with, or could I please play with your Superman? And I'd go, okay, let me go into the room, find a Superman that I was okay with him playing with, make a note for myself, find him a Superman. And that's kind of how his collection evolved. It was all the things he wanted to play with that was mine. Let me see if I can find him a version for himself that he could then play with.
That's very thoughtful, dude. You're a better human than I am. Like, I know we'll probably get into that, but I'm by no means like a serious statue collector, but I got statues opposed to figures. But dude, you're a better man than me, because like when I've got I don't have many, but I've got one Nightcrawler sideshow. I'll show it maybe one day, but I mean, there's 400 in the world. And if a kid knocked that over, I wouldn't be as kind as you. I'd probably like lose my mind.
But bearing in mind, I mean, the statue is designed to be displayed, whereas an action figure, if you think about it, is designed to be posed, played with, moved, etc. So,
for sure.
I take your point, and
but having said that, you still do have a good point. It doesn't matter how rare something is. It's like a material thing, man. Like, I think we could all take a lesson from that. Be like, okay, I can't replace it, but I can eat tomorrow, so that's cool, you know. I have a roof over my head, so you got to put things into perspective at some point.
Yeah, and that's what I've tried to do with all of it. Every time I go into that room and look over them, or even look through the ones that are still in boxes, the sense of accomplishment, the nostalgia, everything is there. But at the same time, I enjoy it for what it is in that moment. And if I had to lose it all tomorrow, I'm okay with it. I've developed that sense of acceptance. If it all had to go, I am okay with that. And that was, probably largely due to little Reese doing that for me. So there we go.
Nice. Shout out to Reese.
Yeah, totally.